All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here, and we are live. I am the host of the Smart Business Revolution podcast. This is a live episode with Dr. Jeremy Weiss. Dr. Weiss, welcome.
Thanks for having me. This will be on inspiredinsider.com as well as Smart Business Revolution.
Yeah, and we're excited to be here today. You know, every week we get to talk to interesting CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, virtually, not anyone. I mean, if I call up Oprah, she probably is going to be busy. I think that probably would be a hard one to get, but it's amazing the people you get to talk to, and it's such a thrill to be able to reconnect with old connections, highlight your clients, and meet new people. And so I'm such an evangelist for this medium of doing podcasts. Been telling people for the 11 years that I've been doing a podcast that everyone should start a podcast, because even if you're not the next Mark Maron, you're not the next Joe Rogan, you're not a huge name in podcasting, it still will deliver tremendous value to your life. And so we are also the co-founders of Rise25, where for many years now, we have helped B2B business owners to connect to their ideal prospects, referral partners, and strategic partners. And this episode is brought to you by Rise25 Media, where we specialize in helping B2B businesses with a high client lifetime value. So if you want to learn more about that, you can email us at support@Rise25Media or check us out at rise25media.com. All right. So Jeremy, in this episode, we're going to be talking about the top tools and software that you can use for creating phenomenal podcasts and content marketing. And
I want to mention something real quick based on what you said. I mean, I think lately you've had, based on connecting with amazing people and using it you actually use it for professional development to learn from really highly respected, experienced people. I think you had the first CEO and co-founder of Netflix on.
That's right.
Recently.
Yep.
What about the comedy?
I am interviewing today the founder of Comedy Central, which should be a lot of fun. I'm a big fan of comedy. My dad used to do stand-up comedy. So I'm a big fan of The Daily Show and Chappelle's Show and so many different shows that have been on Comedy Central. So that's fun.
I didn't realize that was today. Okay, nice.
Yeah, so that'll be later today. I mean, I recently interviewed a guy who's a professor at my alma mater. So that's a good example. Jeremy, you did a great series for University of Wisconsin profiling different entrepreneurs, and you interviewed, the CEO of Mattel, CEO of Land's End, a number of other household named people, where your alumni office, I'm sure, was thrilled that you were doing this and excited to introduce you to some of the most prestigious alumni. And so I finally decided to do the same thing. I went to UC Santa Barbara, and they actually
your mascot is
the Gaucho.
Okay.
Which is Spanish for pants, cowboy pants.
That's a really fierce mascot.
It's fierce. It is. That's true. They don't have a big athletic program there.
Gaucho.
And so I decided to do this, and I reached out to the alumni, spoke to a couple of people in the alumni department, and they introduced me to some people. I recently interviewed a professor who's also a venture capitalist, also a seasoned entrepreneur, who'd started a bunch of companies. He was involved in GoToMeeting, which is a precursor to Zoom, which everyone's on these days, one of the early video conferencing companies. And now he's a venture capitalist. Then he introduced me to another individual who had a great conversation with, who founded, one company that's at $1 billion valuation. He is on the board and investor in a couple other companies that are multi-billion-dollar unicorns, and just had a great conversation with him. Turns out his son listened to my podcast, so that was great street cred right there.
Nice.
But you're right. It is personal development. It's professional development. It's connections. But this topic, we want to talk about tools and software recommendations. But before we get to that, one of our most important missions is to say to people, it's really not just about the tools, right? People come to us all the time. We see people start podcasts all the time. They spend 12 hours, 20 hours researching the microphone that they're going to buy. They spend no time thinking about the people that they're going to feature and how doing a podcast is going to really dramatically change the network of people that they're connected to, and actually putting some thought into that in advance. So I think our most important message is that is incredibly important. And you need to think about that piece. Having said that, in this episode, we're going to talk about
this is a popular question. That's why we're addressing it.
it's a popular
Even
question.
though it's maybe 7th on our list of important things to address,
Yes.
like a distant 7,
Right.
it's still something that holds people up, and we want to see people that aren't held up. And one of the things that holds people up is naming their show and the tools and the software and the stuff it takes to get it going. But like you said, John, it's really about mapping out who you want to feature and the topics you want to talk about, which if you have questions, you can go to rise25.com. We actually help people map this stuff out so you can launch and run your podcast the right way.
Right. Or the funny thing is, a lot of times people, I've talked to so many people that, 3 years ago, they spent $300 buying, a microphone and all this other different equipment, and it's been sitting on the corner of their desk for the last 3 years.
There was someone I talked to a couple weeks ago, and they were asking for advice, and they said, there was 3 years ago, they bought like $2,000 worth of equipment and never used it.
And never started. Yeah. It's sad to see that. I mean, I talked to a guy, this was like a year ago, who had spent $100,000 building out a huge video studio, buying top of the line, all this kind of stuff. But then he'd been doing it for 6 months and hadn't gotten any good results from it. Nothing to show for it except for, some really pretty videos.
The strategy has to be in place.
It has to be in place. So having said that, let's start with microphones. So let's
just say, like, we're not technical wizards, right? So the advice that you're going to get from us, we're about simplicity, and simplicity that produces a good product, but it's not going to be, we don't geek out on technical related things. So the caveat, there's lots of people that are way more experienced in this than we are. We just find something that works well, that's fairly affordable, and go with it.
And the funny thing is, I will say to people with pride, if you paid me, meaning me individually, to launch your podcast, I couldn't do it from start to finish. I couldn't do it. I don't know all the different steps that are involved. We have an amazing team that does an incredible job of setting all those pieces up. But the reason that I'm proud of that is because what I'm really good at, and what you're especially good at, what our superpowers is making sure the podcast is profitable, making sure that you use it to develop tremendous relationships, to connect with people that you admire, to have great conversations, to continue that conversation beyond the interview. How do you take it further? How do you go further? How do you turn that into a referral relationship or a strategic partnership of some sort? That's really where a lot of people drop the ball. And so that's really what we focus our energy and attention on, and making sure that that's right. Now, as far as the microphone is concerned, I'm speaking out of an Audio-Technica ATR 2100. The funny thing about it is 11 years ago, I purchased this microphone, not this exact one, but the same exact model 11 years ago. It lasted me about 9 years. I made a decision at the beginning. I purchased it, boom, done. Didn't think about it for 9 years. And then it crapped out. It stopped working. And so I bought the exact same one again. I didn't even upgrade. I didn't even spend more and get a nicer one, which you have a nicer one, because it's
not that much nicer. And by the way, if you're listening and you have a suggestion of a mic you like, feel free to put it in the comments if you're listening to this live. But yeah, ATR 2100. And I think they have a newer version. This was probably the one you got. This is a Blue Yeti. I mean, yours is probably $70. This one is $120. And it's a USB mic. I mean, literally, you could get a USB mic, plug into the back of your computer, and use it. Okay.
Yeah.
People have fancy soundboards. That are plugging in and out of maybe nicer, fancier mics. But you can get a nice sounding mic for $70 to $150. And this is the Blue Yeti. I have yours, John, actually over there, because when I travel, I don't like detaching all this stuff. So I bought another one, which is yours, that I bring with me.
My main microphone is his backup.
Oh, I mean, because like you said, I could be in the middle of interviewing someone, and this is, I don't even know, this may be 10 years old. Yeah. I mean, this is really, you can get the newer version, which is pretty much the same thing. But right. That is part of the equipment we recommend. If you have other suggestions, put them, put them in the comments or whatever it is. And I want to point out, we have a whole cheat sheet of the different equipment and tools and other things. So if you want to check, go to rise25.com/cheat sheet. We share more recommendations of how to get clients, referrals, strategic partners, and about the tools and equipment and everything there too.
Right.
So the mic, I don't know if there's any other combination. The other thing I want to say is their podcast arm is very helpful. Typically the mic just comes on a stand. So getting some kind of boom arm is helpful. This one is like a Rode Podcaster boom arm. It's $99. I have another one that I get when I travel. It was like $20. It works fine. You screw it onto the desk. So
it's actually a great point, because this actually gets a lot of comments having this boom arm here. And I say to people all the time, because they look at it and they're like, "Ooh, you have an amazing microphone." And I'm like, the microphone's not that amazing. What's amazing is just this arm thing here. And it's just kind of
not even amazing.
It's not even this is not that expensive an arm, but it's just helpful in getting it out of the way. The other point I'll make is I see people all the time that have purchased like a $300 microphone, and then they record like this. They're like standing over here. And so the audio quality is poor because they're not putting the microphone right in front of their mouth. So what I say to people, just make sure that you get to put it right in front of your mouth. And if you use the cheap little 3-inch stand that came with the microphone, a lot of times it's going to be way below where your mouth is.
Yeah, and there's a certain settings if you're using the Yeti, which I learned because someone's like, your sound you weren't using it correctly and so they coached me on actually using it way back when, 10 years ago. So there's certain settings you want to have this on that it works properly.
So what other software recommendations? So that's hardware, microphone.
So
what
microphone, yeah. I mean, that's a mic conversation. Any USB mic that's decent is good. The other one we get asked about is what do you use to record? Actually, if you are doing live streaming, that's a different answer than if you are not live streaming, but you can use something like StreamYard to live stream. And this will be a podcast episode as well. We use Zoom. I mean, most people are on Zoom. Back when I used Skype with Ecamm Call Recorder, but Zoom is just so easy and everyone's used to being on it. We just use Zoom. There's a lot of different ways to record. I mean, any way that you find is easy for you that you're normally using, use. We don't have necessarily a preference. We just want to make it easy for the other person and for yourself to have any barriers in recording.
Yeah. And that's a great point. It again goes down to, it's funny because I'll talk to people that have got a massive business. They have 100 people working for them, 200 people working for them, or they're doing 10 million, 20 million a year. And they want to know, what software should I use to record? And I'll also honestly say to them respectfully, this is not something that you should be focusing on. This is really, spending your time thinking about those things is not the best use of your time. What's a lot better use of your time is focusing your energy and attention not on that piece. But having said that, it is important, and it is simple just to use something like a Zoom, which everyone's familiar with. You don't have to use any kind of fancy recording software beyond that. Jeremy, what about any other software recommendations that people should use?
I mean, as far as software goes, people ask, well, where do I put it? Like as an audio host. So as an audio, I mean, again, like the caveat is also this stuff changes, software changes. Zoom, 5 years, 10 years from now, people may be using something else. So just follow whatever's easier. Where do you put it? How do you get it up on all these channels? Well, you need an audio host, just like a website needs a web host. You need an audio host. We've been using Libsyn for over a decade. We like Libsyn. There's lots of audio hosts out there, right?
Yep.
But so again, we just look for something that is been in the industry for a long time and is stable and dependable. And all of them are, I mean, the range of pricing is going to be from like $5 to $60, no matter what audio host you go with. And we just like Libsyn. They've been around for a long, long time.
Right.
Some people ask us, should I use Anchor? It's free. And John, you have an opinion on Anchor.
Yes.
In free, there's nothing that's free. I want to pay for my services to know that I own the account. and it's not going anywhere. I know Anchor was purchased by, did Spotify buy them? I can't
think it was
remember now.
Spotify. Yeah.
Okay. So, so they have major backing, which is fine, but they also, I forgot if you saw The Social Dilemma, but if you're not paying for the product, you are the product.
Yep.
So if you are on Facebook, you're not paying. Well, guess what? You are the product. And same thing with Anchor. If you're not paying for it, you are the product. So they can use your means and channels.
And we've seen this story before. We've seen it play out. It happened with I forget the name of it, but it was owned by Twitter, the platform, short video snippets. They were like 6-second video snippets. And I remember reading an article about a guy who had 2.7 million followers on this platform, and Twitter, and it was a free platform, and Twitter just decided one day to shut it down. No notice, nothing. And these people completely lost these livelihoods, these massive followings.
Was it like Vine or something?
Vine, thank you.
Vine.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
And so Anchor could be the same thing. They could just decide one day, you know what, this didn't work out. Free podcast hosting, turns out, who knew it didn't work? And so they just shut it down, and you lose your feed, you lose your subscribers, everything you put into it, because you didn't spend anything for it. You lose all that.
I mean, Libsyn's like $15 a month or something.
Yeah,
I think the initial plan is $5.
Yeah, so exactly. It's absolutely manageable.
Yeah.
All right, so people say that people also ask about, now people ask me all the time about different software that comes along, and podcasting has exploded in popularity, and so there's a lot more people asking about these different tools that have come around. And generally what I'll say to people is, yeah, there's some good tools that are out there for creating all kinds of additional assets out there. But again, since we're usually talking to a B2B business that's profitable to begin with, that's using a podcast for business development and for content marketing purposes, again, usually I say to people, not something you should focus on. Something that you should be focusing on is how you're going to use the podcast.
Yeah.
And I also will say this, and I said this to people even before we had a vested interest and we were helping people with starting podcasts, is that you should create pressure for yourself by having someone outside, not within your team. You should focus on what you do best, and you should have an outside company or team that is worrying about these things, because these tools change all the time. And you don't want to have to, go down a rabbit hole spending an hour trying to figure out some tool that isn't working, when you can just send an email and have them handle it. And a much better use of that hour is you interviewing 2 people who may be great champions of yours. That's a much better use of your time. Yeah. So for most companies, it makes a lot more sense for you not to worry about these various different tools.
That's a good point, John. And like when we're speaking to that B2B business owner. If someone is trying to create the next serial or whatever the next series, they'll probably, geek out on the technical part and making sure the sound quality is like NPR style. They're in a different type of business, right? Their business is in the business of the podcast or the content. Because I remember when one of our clients said, I heard the audio quality is like 3 times better than Zoom or something. And they went and they used that platform. I won't name the platform. And the person on the other end couldn't get it working. Then the recording didn't show up. I'm like, just listen.
Lost recordings.
Yeah. Just don't worry. Like it wasn't a necessity for them. And so
it wasn't worthwhile. Yeah. One last tool I want to mention, which is, you might laugh, but this is really important, is Calendly, or some kind of online scheduling tool.
There's Acuity scheduling or Calendly. Yeah.
The reason why this is so important is it's amazing, but this one piece of streamlining the front end process of scheduling people to be guests with you on your podcast without it having really being time consuming, it can become really time consuming, and it can sink the ship from the beginning. Because, I do 2 episodes a week. Jeremy does 2 episodes a week. We publish over 100 a year. I don't recommend that for everyone. For most people, I recommend a weekly podcast, but that's still 45 to 50 people a year. And just the process of scheduling that can be really difficult, can be draining of people's energy. So using a tool like Calendly to automate that process and to streamline it is very powerful. So you want to make sure that you put some time in just to get that set up properly from the beginning. And that's not all. There's other pieces that we recommend for it, but we do recommend using a tool like Calendly.
Yeah, I wanted to say on that, you want to make sure you have the best customer interviewee experience you can. And when you use a tool like that, first of all, it eliminates the back and forth, so it's nice. They get to choose a time that's convenient. It's nice. It also follows up with the most frequently asked questions, because you can set a follow up with, here's what most people ask me, and it just helps with the follow up of, so the person's prepared because they may have questions. What's the show like? What should the setup be like? And so you could have that follow up in an automated fashion to create the best experience for that guest.
Yeah, yeah. Benjamin Folger says, unfortunately, this has happened to us last week.
I wonder what that he's talking about.
I think he might have been talking about not having or a misfire on the scheduling piece. I think that might have been what he'd been talking about. So, yeah, I mean, we see it happen all the time where
it's
people,
been game changing for me to set up. And some people resist this, John. I mean, maybe we talk about the resistance point, which is like, well, I want to control my schedule, and I want to, I mean, listen, I've gone through all that as well. Like, well, I want to kind of look at it to see where I should put people. In the end, just send them to the calendar link to schedule.
Absolutely. Right. You know? It's gonna make things so much faster. So
I don't know if there's any other software. I'm trying to think of as any other questions we get. We get recording, we get mics, we get the audio host, we get scheduling wise, streamlining the process, which is the scheduling link. Is there any other software or tools that people ask us about?
Well, one thing that's become really popular is creating micro content out of your podcast, which we do. If you follow us on LinkedIn, you'll see us sharing that. We create interactive dynamic audios, and we create graphic images. And there's no silver bullet perfect software out there. It requires a human to look at these episodes, look at what's the best snippet that's going to position, both the host and the guest appropriately. Sometimes you need to cut it down shorter. So there's a bunch of different pieces.
That's a good point.
And there's no AI that's going to like perfectly do those things these days. But that is creating micro content, and there's a host of different tools, and there will be more tools, is a great way to take your content and have it go further.
Yeah, that's a good point, John. It's like our process for doing that is the writer identifies what the best snippet is. Then they basically hand it to the editor because it's transcribed, and then the audio or video person will cut it at that certain point. Then the editor will go back through to make sure the transcription is correct, and then there's someone posting it on the different channels and making sure that people are tagged and the right comments are there. So there's a lot that goes into that little 60-second snippet.
Right. Yeah. It's a multi-step process. So you also want to make sure that you have that streamlined, because it shouldn't be something that you're doing. It should be something that is handled for you, because the highest best use of your time is spent having great conversations with great people.
There's one other piece I forgot on the technical end, because we're so not the expert when it comes to some of this technical stuff, is Ian Garlic, actually, the lighting. Okay. So the lighting, if you're doing video, Ian Garlic, I made him get on. There was some episode, Facebook Live, that I made him just get on and explain it. So we'll have to find it and like link it up so people can watch it. But I just got, I think, like $100 set on Amazon of these big lights. And my lighting is not even that great in this place, because, he advised I put something right in front of me, which I don't, but because I just don't have the room. But a good lighting where you have, lighting in front of you, is, will make it look much better as well.
Yeah. So with that, Jeremy, where can people go to learn more about Inspired Insider and Rise25?
Yeah, go to inspiredinsider.com to check out more episodes of the podcast. I've had anywhere from the founder of Kettle Chips to Atari to P90X to Big League Chew. And I know, John, you can go to Smart Business Revolution, where he's had an amazing founder. I mean, he has some amazing this week alone, Netflix, and what was the one that was later today? Comedy
Central.
Comedy Central.
Yeah.
And you can go to rise25.com and check out more if you're interested in learning more about podcasting.
And go to rise25.com/cheat sheet to grab a list of these different tool and software recommendations. And that's it for this week. Thanks everyone for being here, and we'll talk again soon.